Welcome to Talking with the Experts. This is where we discuss great ideas to take your business to the next level. How do we know these ideas work? Well, it's because we're talking with business owners who are using these ideas. Business owners who have years of experience and expertise. All things business by business owners for business owners. And now, here is your host, Rose Davidson.
In episode 416, Janine Wirth answers the question how unresolved trauma can hold entrepreneurs back in their businesses without them even realising it.
Your body is telling you, hey, I've got trauma stored here. I need you to take care of this. So while we can't take responsibility, what happens to us is not our fault, but it is our responsibility to heal ourselves, especially if we want to have good relationships, if we want to have children. I always say it's your responsibility to take care of your emotional baggage, because you should want to give your child a childhood that they do not need to heal from. And we carry these behaviors over because we don't know any better. If we look, especially people my age or older, our parents didn't know about emotional intelligence. It was, you stop crying, well, I'll give you something to cry about sort of mentality. They were
Talking with the Experts.
Hi, I'm Rose Davidson from Talking with the Experts. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Global Glamping Charities for their valued support. Global Glamping Charities, solving homelessness in all its forms. Reach out to them at globalglamping.org. Do you love your podcast and dislike the editing and uploading to the various platforms? Would you like to spend this time with your family and friends or work on your business? Podcast editing doesn't have to be a chore. Talking with the Experts partners with podcasters who need help with audio and content editing. If you'd like to know more, contact me, Rose Davidson, using the link showing now, or send me a private message. Hello and welcome to Talking with the Experts. I'm your host, Rose Davidson from rosedavidson.com. Talking with the Experts is about all things business by business owners for business owners. You can find it on all good podcasting streaming platforms and on YouTube. And now let me ask you, do you have some unresolved trauma? Well, my next guest, Janine Wirth, is going to discuss with us how unresolved trauma can hold entrepreneurs back in their businesses. And most often we don't even realise it, because often self-sabotaging behaviours can be linked to trying to protect yourself after painful or traumatic events in childhood. For example, fear of visibility, procrastination, fear of rejection, which makes it very difficult to show up fully in our businesses. Janine Wirth is also known as the trauma whisperer, and she is an internationally recognised trauma expert. She helps entrepreneurs heal from painful life experiences and generational trauma so they can show up fully and attain the success that they desire. Welcome, Janine, and thank you so much for giving us your time today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to speak to you.
Oh, tell me, how did you become the trauma whisperer?
It's actually a journey that started early on in life with myself. I say that I have this deeply passionate relationship with trauma because I was born to a mother who experienced trauma. And unfortunately, back in those days, it was sort of the attitude of let's sweep it under the carpet, ignore it, and hopefully it will go away. But we know now it doesn't work like that. And so I had quite a traumatic childhood myself, which culminated into me surviving a hijacking, kidnapping, and attempted rape at gunpoint at the age of 18 on the very same day I got my driver's license. So that was sort of my initiation into adulthood. And, you know, you never know how you're going to respond if something like that happens to you, because we always talk about the fight, flight, or freeze response. Well, my default response happens to be fight, as I found out on that day, because there were two of them, and as he put his gun to my head and said, take off your clothes, I said to him, you will have to kill me first. And obviously at that point in time, I wasn't married, I didn't have children. Would I respond like that now, being a mother of 3? I don't know. Hopefully I will never have to find out. But in that moment, I just felt this intense rage. Like everything that I've been through, finally I'm getting to the point where I can start living my life myself. And then something like this happens. This is it. And well, obviously I survived that experience. And about a week after that experience, I got my car back because the police had a shootout with these two. I got my car back and I was sitting in my car on a parking lot waiting to pick someone up. And a friend of mine who didn't know what had happened to me crept up on my car and, as a prank, wanted to scare me, slammed his hand down on my driver's side window. And of course, I, in that moment, felt like I wanted to jump out of my skin. I got heart palpitations. It felt like I couldn't breathe, almost like a panic attack kind of thing. And then I thought, okay, I don't want to live the rest of my life like this. I'm 18, like the best is supposed to be ahead of me. So I actually went and saw a therapist, learned that I had PTSD. And that was sort of the start of this relationship with trauma, where I read everything I could get my hands on and could see how things show up without you even realizing it, because your mind is almost on autopilot in this self-protection mode. And I went on to have a corporate career. You know, this was just something interesting that I thought is something that I would work on privately. But then one of my best friends a few years ago was on his deathbed. He got cancer very unexpectedly, and the progression was so fast, 6 months. And on his deathbed, he said to me, make sure that you're doing what is something really worthwhile in life, because I thought I would have more time. And that really hit me. And I was like, oh, what am I doing? I'm making money for this huge corporation, but is this really what I want to do with my life? And lucky for me, I have a very supportive husband. And by then, my children were a little bit older, not that dependent on me. And he said to me, well, if you want to change careers, now is the time to do it. I just want you to be happy. I said to him, I would love to be a therapist, and I want to specialize in trauma, and I want to work with women. And here we are.
Wow, what a story. My goodness, you are just so lucky that you survived that, because I know a lot of people wouldn't have. So yeah, well done to you.
Thank you.
I can't even imagine what it would have been like. I thought my trauma was really scary, but yours was like, oh, out of this world, really. I don't know what to say. It's really blown me away.
I think that, obviously it could have made me a very bitter person in victim energy, like the world owes me something. But instead, I feel that it gives me a very unique perspective on trauma, because I didn't learn about trauma just from a book. I have lived experience. I know what it feels like to have PTSD symptoms. So if a client comes to me and says this and this and flashbacks, then I'm like, yeah, I've got you. I know what that's like. I'm not just saying, well, okay, this is what I was taught. So I think that gives me a very unique perspective, and also makes me more relatable, because you can imagine that I hear the worst of the worst in this line of work, and nothing shocks me, because I've had my own experiences where it's like, I get it.
Yeah, no, I understand that as a I've got complex PTSD, and yes, so I understand exactly what you're talking about there. But I know people that have had traumatic experiences, and most often it's I won't say most often, I suppose a lot of times it happens in childhood, and they carry those beliefs and behaviours throughout their adulthood. But and sabotaging behaviours are, the worst, because you do have that fear of not being enough, not being good enough, and so you can't attract good clients when you have that horrible self-limiting belief. And so how can we, as people who have been through a traumatic experience, it doesn't matter at what age, how can we stop ourselves from having this self-sabotaging behavior, and the things like imposter syndrome and procrastination?
Well, being aware of it is the first step, because you can't fix what you don't think is a problem or recognize as a problem. But very often it can show up in quite sneaky ways. I'll give you an example. I had a client come to me and she said, I have watched I've bought all the courses, I've watched all the YouTube videos, I know what I'm supposed to do. But when it comes to being visible online, it's like, I just can't do it. If she schedules that she's going to do a webinar, all of a sudden she'll lose her voice, or she'll get a migraine the day before. All these sneaky things where she felt like even her body was sabotaging her. So I said to her, well, there's only one way to go and find out. And I like to use regression hypnosis, because I can ask you questions until the cows come home, and your logical mind will come up with an answer because now you feel obligated to answer my question. But in hypnosis, we're dealing with your subconscious mind, which is like this giant vault, and all of your memories are filed there. And I can go and pull out the file. And in regression, she went back to a scene where she was about 4 years old, hiding in a cupboard. She said to me, I'm so scared. I feel like I'm going to die. I said to her, why are you hiding in the cupboard? And it turns out her father was a raging alcoholic. And whenever he got into these alcoholic rages, he would start physically and verbally abusing his wife. And as she got older, he started verbally abusing her. And then that slowly started moving into beating her. And as a 4-year-old, locked in that cupboard, hiding, fearing for her life, I said to her, what are you thinking? What is 4-year-old you thinking? And she said, if I get found, he might kill me. So in that moment, her subconscious mind linked being found as life-threatening. So you don't need to be a brain surgeon to figure out why showing up online, being visible, was so threatening to her subconscious mind, because it had from such a young age associated being found, being visible to life-threatening. So obviously I helped her process the emotions that were there, made her a bespoke audio to change and create neural pathways in her brain to say, okay, you're not 4 years old anymore. Her father had already passed. And showing her with little bits, this is where the coaching part comes, taking those little actions where her nervous system can still be regulated. Nervous system regulation is so important for entrepreneurs. And taking those little actions and like, oh, actually, I can be safe and do this. And this isn't going to kill me. And through that process, she was then able to start showing up fully, start seeing that success in her business that she really desired. And that for her changed the whole trajectory of her business, because nowadays you need to be visible online as an entrepreneur. I mean, it's part of the thing. So often people say, well, this happened to me so long ago, I should be over it by now. But they don't realize that in that moment, 4-year-old you or 7-year-old you or 11-year-old you was completely overwhelmed with the experience, didn't know how to process those emotions, and they don't just magically vanish. Your subconscious mind holds on to them. And then when you're older and more capable, you'll start getting these little nudges. Hey, here's something. There's a whole pile of baggage here that you need to take care of. And you'll start noticing it. So start noticing if you want to do something and you start having physical symptoms, that's a good way. Or if you get triggered, keep a little diary and say, today I felt like this. right after this happened? Because very often when we get triggered to feel not good enough, it brings up everything from the past, because the part of your brain that controls trauma doesn't understand time. It just recognizes the feeling, and then it's as if it happened yesterday and your body's responding to that, which is why for some people, depending how severe their trauma was, that response can be so powerful that you can't miss it. Your body is telling you, hey, I've got trauma stored here. I need you to take care of this. So while we can't take responsibility, what happens to us is not our fault, but it is our responsibility to heal ourselves, especially if we want to have good relationships, if we want to have children. I always say it's your responsibility to take care of your emotional baggage, because you should want to give your child a childhood that they do not need to heal from. And we carry these behaviors over because we don't know any better. If we look, especially people my age or older, our parents didn't know about emotional intelligence. It was, you stop crying, well, I'll give you something to cry about sort of mentality. They were so busy trying to just deal with their own lives and all their trauma, because a lot of their parents or grandparents had been in wars, faced starvation, poverty, all kinds of things. They didn't do inner work. So they carry those behaviors over, and we become that product of our environment and our conditioning, and we carry that over. Or you can become what I call bloodline disruptors, which says, okay, this stops with me. I'm not going to carry this on. I'm going to be the one that does the work, and the next generation and the generation after that is going to profit from that, because they're not going to know what it's like to experience this abuse in what is supposed to be the safest place, their home, from the people who are supposed to love them unconditionally and keep them safe. Very often, those are the people who hurt you the most.
Yeah, I can vouch for that. Yeah, and so I guess, and everything that you said obviously is reflects in your business. It's the way you deal with your clients, and
Yes.
it's how you deal with just the everyday running of your business. Because as you said about that woman who, and that you were speaking of, she was too afraid to show up online, and everything's about being online these days. And I could so relate to that story, because every time I had to give a webinar, I'd get sick, my throat would just close. I'd be ill, hours before. And so I can so relate to how that woman was feeling, because it's to do with fear of putting yourself out there, and it's a scary thought, but you don't realize it at the time.
Well, I mean, your mind and body's number one purpose is to keep you safe. And it will go to some quite extreme lengths, losing your voice, getting migraines, all kinds of things, to do that, because it believes that that is its purpose, to keep you safe. When it sees that you're engaging in things that are not going to keep you safe, it's going to say, hey, I don't want you to do that, and I'm going to do everything in my power to prevent it. So, but once you know about it and your logical brain can make sense of it, and you can process those emotions, because broken bones, bruises, cuts, they all heal. But it's the emotions that get attached to those events. Those are the things that will come back and throw everything into chaos, because those emotions need to be processed. The fear, the shame, the guilt, all of the anger, bitterness, all of those things need to be processed, because your subconscious mind is the pilot. And if the pilot thinks that it needs to go left because it's been going left for decades, you can't just wake up one day and say, okay, well, now I'm going to go right.
It doesn't work that way.
Unfortunately, no, but there are people like me that can help you with that.
Absolutely, yeah. And you can't just decide one day that you're going to be different, because absolutely does not work, because you're right, you are very right in what you say, is that your brain and your body are there to keep you safe. And if you're in your logical mind decide, I don't want to do this anymore, I'm going to do this thing now, it takes a long time to get to do this thing, because your body and mind will still keep you where you've always been going. So yeah, it's such a truth bomb when you say that, because people think it's so easy, and they say, just get over it, and why don't you just move on, and it's easy for them to say when they've not lived through any sort of serious type trauma. I mean, scraping your knee or having a broken leg really isn't, well, it can be traumatic, I suppose, but not in the way that you and I have dealt with trauma throughout our lives. So yeah, so yeah,
I think that the one thing that I always say is society teaches us to rate and compare all the time. But when it comes to trauma, don't fall into that trap, because one of the things that women say to me the most when they decide that they deserve to get help and to finally deal with this stuff is they'll say to me, well, I was bullied my entire childhood, but at least I wasn't raped. There are no prizes to be had here. We don't rate and compare trauma.
Yeah, I used to get that a lot when I was in my 20s. It was like, and comparing traumas, and honestly, you can't do that, because one person's experience and feeling of the event is much different than the next person. So
there's so many things that feed into that. Personality, some people are more sensitive, emotional maturity at the time that this event happened to you, who hurt you, that plays a role in it. It's different if a stranger hurts you or if one of your parents hurts you. That's something completely different, right? So it's very, I would say, unhelpful to have these conversations that, well, at least it wasn't this, or at least it wasn't that. You deserve to get help regardless of where it falls in your mind about, the rating. There is no rating.
There's no rating on trauma and experiences. I mean, I don't believe there can be. I mean, there may be, scientifically, but in my brain, trauma is trauma, and I don't think you can rate it from 1 to 10.
No, and we shouldn't try to. What happened to you is your own personal experience, and you deserve to get better. The end. There is no in between.
Absolutely. Yeah. So for those that are listening out there or watching this video, please, if you've been through some type of traumatic experience, go and see a therapist. Go and reach out to Janine. Her details will be left in the show notes, because you don't let yourself just continually suffer. Because if you own a business, and by listening to this podcast, I would imagine that you do, it's not helpful for you. It's not helpful for your business, and it's not helpful for your clients.
Yeah. So I think that a good way to start for people when they go on this journey, and each journey is different, and that's the beauty of it. Your journey is your journey. I think a good place to start is inner child healing, and I would love to gift your community something for that if they are interested in it. It's a good place to start, because a lot of times people are scared to do this work. They're like, well, what if I get re-traumatized? Or they think it's like opening Pandora's box. But if you're listening to this and you feel like that, I want to tell you, you've already experienced that. You've already survived that. You're sitting here, you're living your life. You've already survived it, so it's not going to be worse than what it was. This is just giving yourself the time, love, and attention that you deserve to go and help the little you. And sometimes little you can be 20, but the emotional maturity and the coping skills weren't there to go back and say, you know what happened to you was awful. I can't turn back the hands of time, but I can help you heal so that the future you can consciously create. And it doesn't matter where you started out in life. You can do anything that you want to do. But you need to take care of the hurt part of you first, because then it becomes a lot easier. When you are not having this tug of war with your mind every single day, you'll have more energy. You'll be able to complete your tasks. You'll have that trust and intuition where you can take those inspired ideas and actually turn them into action that change the trajectory of your life. So it's definitely worth doing, even if you think, oh, this is going to be a scary experience. Nothing is scarier than what has already happened to you, and you've already survived that.
Yes, and surviving, really, you need to be proud of yourself for even getting through it. And, especially if it happened to you in your younger life and you've been around for an extra 20 or 30 years, you've survived that trauma. You've gotten through it. You've become a better person because you've lived your life, I guess, and moved on from and even though the pain is still there somewhere in your life, you're a survivor because you survived the event.
Yes. And for me, there's a difference between surviving and thriving.
Yeah,
you can go through your life and ignore what happened to you and shut down a big part of your personality, or you can be courageous and say, you know what if I heal this part and then have access to who I was always meant to be before this happened to me? Because I think a lot of us, and for myself even, that was like a big question until I actually did this inner work. It's like, who would I have been if this hadn't happened to me?
Yeah, I still wonder that sometimes. Who would I have been if my parents had have made better choices? What would I be doing with my life now if we hadn't moved to this particular area of the world? So it's it sometimes it's can be more harmful to think of those things, because you are who you are now because of how you've lived your life, regardless if it's through a traumatic experience or not. But you are who you are, and it's no good wondering, because I don't know, sometimes I think the universe has plans for us that we don't even know what they are. So
Well, the thing is, once you do the work and you do the healing, you will have access to who you were, your personality innately before that happened to you. Because when you're not carrying around shame, guilt, anger, fear, bitterness, all of those negative emotions, you start showing up differently. You start making different choices, different decisions. Your relationships change. A lot of times children who grew up in very tumultuous home, can we say, a lot of them end up being people pleasers because they're so used to just trying to keep safe that they will just make sure that everyone is happy. And that has big effects in your life later on if you have problems with boundaries, or if people treat you like a doormat. Even in your business, if you don't have good boundaries, your clients are going to be, the clients that you attract are going to be a completely different caliber to independent clients, who want to do the work, who aren't in victim mode or mentality, that are all in, that show up for themselves. They don't just think, okay, paying and, making the payment does all the work for them automatically. It doesn't work like that. So I think that if you have this question, who would I have been? That's a good sign that you need to start doing the work, because then you will find out, because your personality will then sort of reset if you're not being triggered all the time, if you show up differently, if you have these good boundaries. The quality of your relationships and the people that you attract into your life is going to change.
That's really good advice. Janine, where can people find you if they want to learn more about what you do, or indeed want to work with you?
So my website is janinewirth.com, but W-I, not W-O. It just sounds like worth, but it's W-I. And on social media, I'm therapist_Janine Wirth. So Instagram is the best place to connect with me. Every day in my stories, I show some of the behind the scenes of my life and business. And then, of course, you will also find a link there in my bio on Instagram with the things that I'm working on at the moment, because I very often run free masterclasses, and I have programs that are more business focused, but also programs that are more healing related for women that want to do the work first and then go into the business portion of it.
I could probably talk to you for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, but we've come to the end of our time, Janine, and I so thank you for spending quality time with me today. Do you have any words of wisdom that you'd like to share with our audience?
I think the most important thing, specifically as women, is that there comes a time in your life where you have to make the decision that you're worth having a better quality of life. Because as women, we tend to put ourselves last, especially if we're mothers or wives or, business owners. Everything else comes first, and we come right at the end. They say that you can't pour from an empty cup. My feeling on that is the cup, what is in it is for me. So if we had to meet somewhere at a coffee shop, you wouldn't drink out of my cup, right? My cup is mine and yours is yours. A lot of people think that if there's just this little bit left in the cup, they've got to give to other people. My theory is the cup has to be full for me, and what overflows and spills out onto the saucer, that is for everyone else. So I know if I don't look after me first, I'm not as good a therapist. I'm not as good a CEO. I'm not as good a mother. I'm not as good a wife, because maybe I'm not as patient. Maybe, I have to look after me first, because if I am not functioning at my full, strongest self, everything else in my life is going to suffer. So make sure that your cup is full. That's for you. And what overflows, that's for everyone else.
Wonderful, 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 wonderful words of wisdom. I love that. Yes, you're right. Your cup has to be full before you can share with others. And you're right. The half full thing is not, it doesn't work that way, does it? Because, you have to drink and have to have thirst, quench your thirst. So,
yeah.
Oh, Janine, thank you again for sharing with us. And I've had an absolute ball just talking with you. And I've really hope that you'll come and join me again later on in the year.
I'd love to. Thank you so much for having me.
Bye for now.
Bye.
You've been listening to Talking with the Experts, hosted by Rose Davidson. Make sure you have a look at our back catalogue over at talkingwiththeexperts.com. And be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss out on any episode. We look forward to your company next time. Talking with the Experts.